Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, a couple of weeks ago, we took a look at the people in key positions behind the scenes in Downing Street. But what about that other SW1 power base, Jeremy Corbyn's Labour Party? Here's Emma Vardy with the latest instalment of our occasional series, Westminster Village.
Jeremy Corbyn spent years as a backbencher, working out of parliamentary offices not much bigger than a cupboard. But now he and his top team have a whole floor to themselves. It's even got a nice balcony. The executive director of the leader's office is Carrie Murphy. She used to work for the deputy leader Tom Watson. And we thought we'd dig this out of the archives one more time. Her reaction to our mood box testing opinion on the shadow cabinet.
This is a stunt by ill-informed people.
Nice to meet you too.
And meet a man known as Jeremy Corbyn's brain.
We don't talk about economic rights, and I think people need economic rights.
Andrew Fisher used to take to the stage himself, like at this trade union event, but he's now more of a behind-the-scenes guy, working as Corbyn's head of policy.
Didn't Thatcher promise us this?
Seamus Milne is the top spin doctor, and rumoured to be the man who got JC to smarten up his image. He's a former Guardian journalist and now trusted close aide.
Seamus, I'm not sure this is a great idea.
The MPs are incredibly out of touch, I think. That's why we've seen these shocks in politics.
Seen here, on the day of the EU referendum result, James Schneider looks after strategy in the comms team. He's an ex-Lib Dem and Green supporter and was previously on our screens representing the pro-Corbyn grassroots organisation Momentum.
Politics has changed. We are in this sort of national crisis period.
Corbyn's inner circle also includes Amy Jackson, political secretary, and former MP Katie Clark, who's looking into potentially big changes that will give Labour Party members more power. And after his recent shoot with GQ magazine, the editor later said Corbyn's entourage pushed him about like a granddad.
The actual shoot itself was quite torturous. It was as difficult as actually shooting any Hollywood celebrity, actually.
Really? Not all fun and celebrity appearances, you know. This is where the party machine operates from, Labour HQ in the heart of Westminster. Ian McNichol is the General Secretary of the Labour Party, its organisational chief. The other key figures in the Corbyn camp are his family.
He's not very good in housework, but he's a good politician.
As we learnt in this fly-on-the-wall Vice documentary, he married his Mexican wife Laura Alvarez in 2013 after they had a long-distance relationship when she was working in banking back home. And here's Seb Corbyn, Jeremy's second son. After working on his dad's election campaign in 2015, Seb was appointed Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell's Chief of Staff. And these days, behind the scenes, I can also reveal that Corbyn has a personal dresser, his own Bentley driver, a private butler. Not really. This was his spoof appearance on the Last Leg comedy programme, of course. You're more likely to see him like this.
Good morning. Nice to see you all. Thank you so much for coming.
Jeremy Corbyn back in normal attire and on his bike, but I'm joined now by Kevin Maguire, Associate Editor of the Daily Mirror. Welcome to the Daily Politics. Kevin, how has the operation changed at Labour since the general election?
Oh, I think it's really continued since the general election. They're fine-tuning it, but the big changes were when he first became leader and people came in, he wasn't quite sure where he wanted to go, there was a lot of discord, and then he seemed to sort it out after that attempt to topple him, and they went into the election and did far better than even he thought. And now you can just feel there's an authority and a confidence around that team. And the crucial player is Carrie Murphy, the Chief of Staff, who is a kind of good friend, bad enemy, but she gets things done, and that's really important.
Right, so who else does Jeremy Corbyn really listen to? Carrie on one side, what about Seamus Milne, who was shown in that film?
Oh, the thin controller. I used to work with Seamus when he was at the Guardian. He's hugely intellectual. He knows where he is coming from politically and ideologically, and he's physically incapable of shouting. He is very, very calm.
Right, but is he the influence, the political influence then behind Jeremy Corbyn?
I think he is an influence. A lot of other influences. There are political influences outside. People like Dawn, Diane Abbott, John McDonnell. They have a lot of influence too. Len McCluskey from the trade unions. But in the office, yeah, Seamus Milne is more than a spin doctor. He does have a role on strategy. That's not to say there aren't disagreements within the team, but they seem relatively harmonious, and more so than I remember Ed Miliband's team. Very bright team, but there seemed to be too much competition internally.
Right, so there's a sort of sense of purpose, a unity in terms of a sense of purpose. Is it a bit strange, do you think, or will it strike people as odd that quite a few of his advisors are public school educated and even from the same school, Winchester?
Yeah, well, it's a very popular school, clearly, in the Jeremy Corbyn office. Yeah, I mean, we saw James Schneider, who's a Bollinger Bolshevik. Seamus himself is an old Wickham-ist. It is a bit odd. I agree. I suspect the working class, the cloth cap, the whippet on a bit of string comes with the in-livery of the party chair, who's a former coal miner. But yes, you're quite right. It is a bit strange. But left-wing politics, like right-wing politics, are often dominated at the top by people from private schools. The Conservative Party's never been short of them itself, has it?
Well, no, indeed. Let's turn to the grassroots organisation Momentum, which backed Jeremy Corbyn. How important is it in terms of the day-to-day running of his office?
I think the day-to-day running of his office, not that important. But in terms of organising around the country, the conference will be selections of councillors and candidates in parliamentary elections, although I think it's massively overstated about the selection. It is then very important. One thing Jeremy Corbyn has that Ed Miliband didn't is he's got a social movement. He's got people joining who will do a lot of the heavy lifting, the leaflet delivering, going along to meetings in constituencies.
Right, and in fact the founder of that organisation, John Landsman, what's the relationship between him and Jeremy Corbyn?
Oh, I think it's pretty close. It's pretty good.
Continues to be.
That's not to say there isn't friction sometimes between Corbyn's office and Jeremy Landsman, who's kind of got one foot in, one foot out. But John Landsman, sorry.
You've made them. You've conflated them.
That's Labour now. Yeah. Landsman certainly in the 80s was a very sectarian figure. I believe just listening, watching, and talking to people around him now is a lot less sectarian, and he will now reach out. There's a lot of MPs don't like him. They dislike him. That's because their parties have got a lot of new people coming in. They don't know who they are. They're being challenged in ways they weren't used to. But Momentum isn't the militant tendency of the 1980s. It's kind of pretty crazy. I know Roy Hattersley was talking, former deputy leader, was.
He said it's worse,
which is utter nonsense. I remember the 80s. I've got grey hair now. I remember them at the time. And Momentum is very different. Most people in Momentum seem to be quite young and idealistic.
Right. What about the impact on voters? Because there isn't anything sort of materially different for the public in terms of the changes at the top, except if we take your word that actually there is more unity. Yeah. That, of course, the public might notice.
Yeah, and they might also, for instance, notice the manifesto, which Andrew Fisher, who featured there, who some MPs wanted kicked out of the party over tweets he'd sent before the 2015 election, which were pretty derogatory about some Labour people. And yet, in about 3 or 4 weeks, he drew up a Labour manifesto, which in many ways was superior to the ones they would spend months, or if not years, producing in early elections. So the public notice that. They will notice the appearances of Corbyn. Those rallies that he goes to, those mass rallies which get him a lot of publicity, they don't happen on their own. Somebody has to organise them, somebody has to think about them, somebody has to get him there.
How much influence do you have then on the day-to-day running? How close are you to Jeremy Corbyn, Dawn?
Well, not day-to-day, because obviously there's lots of things that I have to do in my role, but the times that I'm there and in Jeremy's office and working with the team, they are phenomenal.
But do they listen to you?
Group of people. Well, occasionally, if I've got something good to contribute, then of course they're going to listen to me. But that's the good thing about the teams, that everybody listens to each other. Even if there's a disagreement, you listen, you talk it through, and then you come out, at the end of it, all in agreement. And the reason why Andrew was, able to produce such a fantastic manifesto in 3 weeks, because it was core to Labour Party's beliefs, and that's what's amazing about the team and about Jeremy.
Does Jeremy Corbyn now agree wholeheartedly with Keir Starmer on the direction now in terms of Britain's relationship to the EU?
Yeah, of course. I mean, of course. I mean, Keir Starmer, as I said, he is a guy of detail, and he's gone through every single. Jack was right. It does become quite laborious and a little bit boring, and talking about all these. And you need someone who's going to go through the detail, embrace the detail, and then say this is where we need to be in our negotiating positions. And
but that wasn't quite what I asked. Are they on the same page?
No, I don't think they are yet. Actually, Keir Starmer's been trying to pull the Labour leadership towards a more pro-EU position for some time around the single market and the customs union. It's a work in progress, or there are divisions quite clearly.
Right. What about the divisions in cabinet? How is that going to hamper the future negotiations?
Well, there is a form to these things. You know, there is a cabinet discussion pending on what stage 2 of these important negotiations looks like, and that's about more than just the EU. Of course, it's about global Britain. What does global Britain mean? Because at the moment,
but are they going to be
flesh on the bones. Well, the way these things happen is that the Cabinet will discuss it, the Prime Minister will make a decision, and then collective responsibility binds everyone in. And I am certain that the Conservative Party, the government, will require that collective responsibility to be exerted when that moment comes.
So you don't expect any more briefings?
So I think that they will decide to let the negotiator get on with doing these negotiations and will back him.
All right, Kevin Maguire, thank you.